Did you know that the actor who played the Red Power Ranger has been charged for murdering his roommate? If not, then you might want to hear about this. On January 31st, 2015, in Green Valley, California, a 36-year-old actor named Ricardo Medina Jr., who was most widely known for his role as the Red Ranger on the Power Ranger Wild Force TV series, was having an argument with his 38-year-old roommate named Joshua Sutter about how Medina's girlfriend had parked their car. As the fight escalated, Medina retreated to his bedroom with his girlfriend. Sutter reportedly then forced his way into Medina's bedroom to keep arguing, but this is where disaster struck. Tensions grew so high that Medina suddenly grabbed a medieval sword he kept by the door in his bedroom and stabbed Sutter in the abdomen, causing him to fall down to the floor. Medina immediately called the emergency services after realizing what he has just done, but it was already too late, as Sutter was pronounced dead upon arrival at the hospital. Medina claimed that he stabbed his roommate in self-defense, but on March 16, 2017, he pled guilty to one felony count of voluntary manslaughter and was later sentenced to the maximum 6 years in prison. However, as of 2020, Medina has been released and lives his life as a free man. If you ever find a random unattended suitcase on the street, make sure to inform the police right away. On a late December 2010 evening at 12:15 a.m., a suitcase was discovered unattended on a street corner in East Harlem. The passerby who made the discovery noticed that blood was dripping from the suitcase and upon opening it, saw a human leg fall out. At this point, they ran to a nearby restaurant and called 911. The contents of the suitcase turned out to be the dead body of a 28-year-old woman named Betty Williams. Police launched an investigation and managed to come upon surveillance footage taken from near the scene where the suitcase was found. They released a creepily eerie video of a man dressed in winter clothing dropping the suitcase off out of frame. The man believed to be responsible was later identified to be a career con named Hassan Malik. Malik was eventually caught and brought to trial for the murder of Betty Williams, and during the trial, he openly admitted to killing Williams using an electrical cord and a frying pan, but insisted that it was for self-defense. And according to Malik's testimony, he claimed that he paid Williams for sex, and the two later got into a physical fight after he caught her stealing his cash. The authorities weren't buying it, and Malik was later charged for the death of Williams. This will probably be the most painful shower you'll ever take in your life. On June 23, 2012, in Dade's Transitional Care Unit in Florida, a 50-year-old mentally ill prisoner named Darren Rainey, who already had been serving a 2-year sentence for the possession of cocaine, defecated in his prison cell and using his feces, he smeared it all over himself along with the prison walls. This immediately got the attention of the guards, so they placed him in the showers, telling Rainey that he will not be let out until he cleaned himself. But unfortunately for Rainey, this will be his last shower. Rainey was locked helplessly in the showers for about 2 hours with no way to control the temperature of the water, as it quickly rose to as high as 160 degrees Fahrenheit. By the time Rainey was found and brought out of the shower, he had suffered second and third degree burns to about 30% of his body, and his skin was practically falling off his body. It was later reported that Rainey was prescribed an antipsychotic drug called Haldol, which the side effects were increased body temperature and heart rate. And so, due to the prolonged exposure to water and heat, it caused his skin to just peel off. Rainey unfortunately did not survive the incident, but what makes this even worse is that investigations later revealed that 8 other prisoners suffered the exact same shower torture. This 13-year-old kid lured a 4-year-old boy into the woods, and what he did is going to completely shock you. On August 2nd, 1993, a 13-year-old boy named Eric Smith was riding his bike to summer camp in a local park day camp. 4-year-old Derek Roby was walking alone to that same camp, so when Smith saw Roby, he lured him into a nearby wooded area. There, Smith strangled him, dropped a large rock on his head, and sodomized him with a small stick. Smith even took Kool-Aid from Roby's lunchbox and poured it onto Roby's open wounds, causing massive pain and suffering. Roby unfortunately passed away, and after 4 hours of investigation, his body was found and the cause of death was determined to be blunt trauma to the head with contributing asphyxia. A funeral was held for Roby, but 2 days after the funeral, on August 8, 1993, Smith confessed to his mother that he killed Derek, in which the Smith family informed law enforcement later that night. Smith was eventually convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to the maximum term for juvenile murderer, which was a minimum of 9 years to life in prison. Smith was a boy who was often tormented by bullies for his appearance, so when asked why he did it, he responded, quote, "Because instead of me being hurt, I was hurting someone else," end quote. An 11-year-old girl from Japan committed a brutal murder, and her reason why is going to completely shock you. On the 1st of June 2004, at the Okubo Elementary School in Sasebo, Japan, an 11-year-old girl named Suji Natsumi, also known as Girl A, suddenly returned to the classroom after lunch with blood all over her clothes. The class teacher, who had noticed the unusual absence of both Suji and 12-year-old Satomi Mitarai, went out to find out what had happened. To her dismay, she discovered Satomi's body in an empty classroom and called the police. Almost immediately after Suji was taken into custody, she confessed to killing Satomi with a box cutter due to a fallout they both had earlier. Suji was reported to have confessed to the crime, saying, quote, I am sorry, to the police officers. She spent the night at the police station, often crying and refusing to eat or drink. Suji initially mentioned no motive for the killing, but shortly afterwards, she did so, and do you know what motivated her to murder her fellow classmate? Well, according to Suji, she and Satomi had quarreled as a result of messages left on the internet, with Suji claiming that Satomi slandered her by commenting on her weight and calling her a goody-goody. This is probably one of the most bizarre occurrences to happen inside a quiet Virginia neighborhood. On August 2019, residents outside the Richmond, Virginia area woke up to find a vintage television delivered to their doorstep. None of the residents ordered a vintage TV, so it raised a large suspicion and led them to observe the CCTV footages, and what they discovered was truly bizarre. In these footages, the culprit was seen carrying a vintage television and leaving it by the doorstep late at night. Although it seems quite unusual, what was even more strange is that this mysterious man hid his actual identity by wearing an actual TV on his head, which later gave him the nickname, the TV Headman. And according to the police, this incident wasn't just a one-time thing. It has happened on multiple occasions where it was later revealed that this TV man actually delivered at least 60 TV sets around the neighborhood. And the man in question wasn't shy either. Even on one home video, it showed him waving to the security camera, which left everyone with more confusion. So, was this just a twisted prank, or was this a start to something truly sinister? Also, who is this mysterious TV man? Why was he delivering all these vintage TVs in the first place? That's still a mystery to this day. If you're a woman going on a date with a man from online, you might want to be careful. In 2016 at Renton, Washington, a 40-year-old divorced mother of 3 children named Ingrid Lynn was on a date with a 39-year-old man named John Charlton. The two had been dating for approximately 1 month from online, and on that one night, she invited John inside her home in Renton. But strangely, Lynn disappeared the next day and was reported missing. However, later that day, police responded to a call from a Seattle homeowner that found several of her dismembered body parts, including a severed head, foot, arm, and a leg inside of a recycling bin that was approximately 10 miles away from her home. Inside Lynn's home, the police discovered blood, human tissue, and a pruning saw in her bathroom, as well as trash bags identical to those containing Lynn's severed body parts. John was eventually arrested on April 11, 2016 and was charged with first-degree murder and auto theft, and when interrogated by the police, he claimed that he had blacked out on a downtown Seattle sidewalk and woke up with facial injuries and cuts to his body after Lynn dropped him off. John eventually pled guilty to all charges against him and was sentenced to 27 years and 9 months in prison. This former footballer goes surfing in Bali, and what happens next is truly unlucky and tragic. In 2017, a 34-year-old former footballer from Belgium named Denis Andre de Sol visited the Indonesian island of Bali with his girlfriend on a holiday. While there, he decided to receive some surfing lessons from a professional instructor. The only strange part was that Denis noticed that a storm was brewing around the beach he was at, but he chose not to think too much about it. Time goes by and all was normal as Denis and his instructor were finishing their session. However, this is where disaster struck, because just as Denis was about to end this session, a lightning suddenly struck both him and his instructor, which instantly knocked them off of their surfboards and get sunk underwater. The pair were immediately taken to the hospital around half an hour later after being recovered from the water, but unfortunately, it was already too late. Both Denis and his surfing instructor sadly passed away, as it was later reported by the police that Denis' chest was blue from bruising, as was the instructor's thigh. So this brings up a good question. Would you go surfing during a storm? When you receive a threat like this, you should definitely run and call the police. On the morning of October 16, 2022, a 42-year-old woman named Young Suk and her 53-year-old estranged husband named Chae Kyung-an were at the brink of divorce and had been fighting over his retirement money. The argument escalated so much that Chae-an even vowed to kill her first before giving a cent of it to her, but that was just the start. At around 1 p.m., Chae-an followed through with this threat when he suddenly attacked Young Suk in his bedroom, duct-taped her hands, eyes, thighs, and ankles, and then drove her into the woods where he stabbed her and dumped her into a shallow grave. Young Suk, however, was able to call 911 with her Apple Watch and sent an emergency notification to her 20-year-old daughter and her best friend before being dragged by her husband to the garage and having her watch smashed with a hammer. But little did Chae-an knew that his wife was determined to stay alive, so while buried alive, she kept squirming underneath the dirt to avoid suffocating. Eventually, after many hours of struggling, she dug herself free and Chae-an got caught and arrested. Still, it makes you wonder, How many more people like Young Suk are currently being buried alive trying their best to get out? This son of a billionaire suddenly passes away in his mansion, but how he came to his death is very suspicious. On the 31st of March 2015, the Getty family received the most shocking news of their lives. 47-year-old Andrew Getty, who is the billionaire heir and grandson of John Paul Getty, had been found dead in his multi-million-dollar mansion in Los Angeles. But it was the bizarre conditions of his death that shocked the world the most. According to the LAPD authorities, Andrew was naked from his waist down when his body was found. Initially, it was believed that the cause of his death was blunt force trauma. Preliminary investigations also revealed that Andrew had sustained an injury to his rectum and was bleeding profusely prior to his death, suggesting that Andrew's death could have been a homicide. A possible suspect being his ex-girlfriend, Lanessa DeJong, whom he had filed a restraining order against just 3 weeks before his death. An autopsy would, however, reveal that Andrew's death was caused by a gastrointestinal hemorrhage due to duodenal ulcers. Andrew had also suffered heart disease and acute methamphetamine intoxication, which further contributed to his death. But could this be the true story? Or did something else happen that we're not being told? That's still a mystery to this day. This boy was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, and you're not going to believe what he has done. On March 9, 2013, in Springfield, New York, a 16-year-old boy named Dylan Shoemaker was asked to take care of his girlfriend's 2 young sons while she was working at a restaurant. His girlfriend, Ashley Smith, finished her shift, and when she returned home, she found her 23-month-old son, Austin Smith, completely lifeless on the floor. Dylan was immediately arrested by the police for killing Austin, and when the doctor examined Austin's body, it was revealed that the cause of death was a severe brain injury resulting from the back and forth movement of his head caused by blows. Dylan, at the trial, kept pleading to the judge that he did not mean to hurt Austin and tearfully apologized, expressing his love for Austin and regret for what had happened. But that quickly went out the window as Dylan later admitted to hitting the child multiple times and eventually placing a pillow over the child's head and repeatedly punching him. And why did he commit such a vile crime? According to Dylan, Austin was crying and was disturbing his baby brother, so he placed a pillow on Austin's head and punched it to stop the crying. This 14-year-old girl burns down her house, and the reason why is going to completely shock you. On the evening of September 2014 in Port Richey, Florida, a 14-year-old girl named Lily Marie Hartwell was reading an ebook of the popular anime Soul Eater, until her mother came into her room arguing with her about chores. Lily was extremely furious, and in the heat of the moment, she thought it would be a great idea to do this one thing to solve her issue, which was to kill her family. So while her mother and her 9-year-old brother lay asleep in their bedrooms, Lily plotted their death. She soaked the bedsheet in bleach and rum and set it alight in the family's garage, causing a massive fire to their home. Luckily, the teen's mother and the 9-year-old brother were able to escape the fire after being awoken by the smoke alarm at about 1:45 a.m. However, for Lily, she ran into a local park to hide and later texted her mom to tell her that she was sorry and hoped that her mother and brother weren't hurt. But the police later arrested the teen with 1 count of arson and 2 counts of attempted murder. And what's even crazier is that in Lily's journal, the police found an entry where she expressed high interest in the widely popular internet mythical character Slender Man and stated that, quote, "If this keeps up, there will be no safety in this house," end quote. What you're about to hear might leave you in a state of doubt about whether you should ever travel by plane. In February 1982, Japan Airlines Flight 350 was making a trip between Fukuoka and Tokyo, commanded by Captain Seiji Katagiri. There were 173 passengers and crew on board. Everything seemed normal for the entire journey, and the possibility of something going wrong seemed nonsensical. However, there was just one thing that was just not right: the captain. Throughout the journey, he did not talk to anyone, nor did he make any announcements, but all that was not too alarming. As the flight began its approach into Tokyo's airport, the plane was guided down in preparation for landing. In the last few minutes before landing, suddenly, the landing gear lowered and the plane descended into the waters of Tokyo Bay. When the co-pilot and the engineer realized it was already too late. The plane had already crashed into the shallow waters, resulting in the death of 24 people out of the 174 on board. Surprisingly, the pilot survived. He tried to blend in with the passengers, but he was identified. After an investigation, they found out about his past. He was actually not mentally stable, suffering from hallucinations and depression. It was even discovered that at one point, he called the police claiming unknown persons had trespassed into his home when there was no one. His wife even left him due to his behavior, but none of this information was passed forward to the airlines, resulting in the death of 24 people and injuries to others. When you're walking around at night, you should definitely watch where you're going. On the night of March 25, 2019, a 22-year-old woman named Faye was out with her friends traveling in her friend's car around the East Sussex area. Everything was normal and everyone was having fun until Faye got the sudden urge to take a leak. Faye immediately asked her friend to pull over so she can find a nearby toilet, and so her friend parked his car at the beachhead trail, but there was just one problem. It was nighttime and really difficult to see due to the dark, but that didn't stop Faye as she kept walking forward in hopes to find a place to leak. Unfortunately, Faye didn't realize that she was next to a cliff's edge and eventually stumbled over it, ultimately leading her to fall off the cliff. Her friends said that they heard a scream and later realized she had fallen off the cliff top, so they immediately called the police. Coast Guard helicopters were then dispatched and her body was found later. According to Faye's friend Dixon, she said that the women had drank small amounts of vodka and gin, and when the toxicology report came out, it was revealed that Faye had small amounts of alcohol in her system. This is probably one of the most devastating accidents from football, so you might want to hear about this. In 2014, a 23-year-old football player named Peter Biak Sangsual was playing against a highly competitive match against the Chamari West FC team in India's Mizoram Premier League. Peter's team needed just one goal to equalize, and around the 60th minute, Peter scored one of the most exciting goals of his life, tying the game 1-1. Peter, as always, performed a signature somersault flip to celebrate the scoring goal, but what happened next was something that neither he nor anyone else present had ever expected. While executing his signature backflip, he couldn't stabilize his balance and landed awkwardly on the ground, resulting in a severe spinal cord injury. It was a very shocking moment for the audience as well as the fellow players. He was immediately taken to a nearby hospital and underwent surgery. But despite intensive care and treatment, he did not survive. It is said that in his last moments, he murmured some words, but no one could understand what he said. He was just 23 years old when he passed away, and his football dreams have come to an end. This is definitely one of the most tragic and gruesome workplace accidents, so you might want to hear about this. On December 2015, a 54-year-old man named Alan Catterall was working at the Piranha Moldings Company in Cheshire, England as a factory worker. He was tasked to clean the plastic off of the sides of the massive oven, so he went inside this giant oven with a crowbar. But this is where everything goes wrong. A fellow employee who was unaware that Alan was inside activated the oven, which automatically locked the oven door. Alan immediately noticed he was locked inside, so he began screaming and crying for help, but no one at the factory was able to hear him. So Alan then resorted to banging on the walls of the oven with a crowbar, hoping to attract someone's attention, but still, no one noticed. The heat eventually got unbearable, and Alan unfortunately was engulfed in flames, with black smoke billowing from his body and filling the factory floor, marking the moment when the factory workers finally noticed that Alan was inside the oven. But it was already too late, as Alan was found dead with severe burns. The Piranha Moldings Company was later found guilty of corporate manslaughter, with investigators laying the blame on maintenance work practices. This is definitely one of the strangest unsolved mysteries you'll ever hear. On May 8, 2008, in Colorado, an 18-year-old boy named Joshua Maddox went for a quick walk outside his home as he enjoyed nature. But strangely, he disappeared and never returned home. So the authorities, friends, and family scoured all over the neighborhood and nearby parkland areas where Joshua may have decided to go walking, but unfortunately, after months of searching, he was never found. However, 7 years later on August 2015, less than a mile away from Josh's home, property developer Chuck Murphy was demolishing an old wood cabin to make way for 32 new family homes. The cabin hadn't been used in years and the inside was dirty, damp, filled with rotten timbers and strewn with garbage. So the workers began to demolish the chimney, and what they found inside was a mummified body that was later confirmed to be Joshua Maddox. And when observing his body, Joshua was found in a fetal position, naked, apart from a thin shirt, and his clothes were neatly stacked inside the cabin. Also, according to the autopsy results, it was suggested that Joshua had tried to climb down the chimney, but ended up getting lodged and stuck, leading him to eventually die from hypothermia. But this raises more questions. How did Joshua end up on this chimney? Why was he in the chimney in the first place? The police ruled his death as an accidental death, but was there really some foul play involved? That's still a mystery to this day. When you hear about this case, it's definitely going to piss you off. Sometime in 1996 in Dubai, a family was having a picnic at the beach for some fun bonding time. The 20-year-old daughter and the son decides to go for a swim, so they dash into the ocean. Soon after the kids went swimming, screams were heard, and what the parents saw was that their daughter was drowning in the ocean waters. This scream immediately garnered the attention of the lifeguards, so they quickly sprung into action. But this is where things turned unfortunate, because when the lifeguards were rushing towards the ocean, the daughter's father, who was described as a strong and tall Asian man, stopped the lifeguards from rescuing his daughter by blocking their path and insisting that they do not save his daughter. The lifeguards eventually dismissed the father's wishes and grabbed the daughter out of the water, but it was already too late as she died moments later. The Dubai police, as a result, arrested the father for preventing his daughter's rescue. And do you want to know why he did so? According to the father, he told the lifeguards that he preferred that his daughter be dead rather than being touched by a strange man, as it would dishonor her. These two teenagers from Iowa commit such a heinous crime, and the reasons why are going to completely shock you. On that morning of November 3rd, 2021, 16-year-old high school student named Willard Miller and his mother met with a 66-year-old Fairfield Spanish teacher named Nohima Grabber to discuss his academic performance. As his teacher, the focus was on addressing Willard's poor grades and finding solutions to improve his marks. Unfortunately, Willard had another plan in mind. Later that evening, Willard contacted his friend Jeremy Gooddale, and together they conspired to ambush and unalive their teacher. Having knowledge of Nohima's afternoon routine, the duo followed her during her daily walk in Chautauqua Park. When the opportune moment arose, they viciously attacked her with a metal baseball bat, causing her to lose consciousness. They dragged her into a nearby forest. At that point, Nohima was still alive, but the two heartlessly continued their assault until they confirmed she was dead. Hiding the woman's body under a tarp, wheelbarrow, and railroad ties, they attempted to conceal their heinous act. They even drove their teacher's vehicle and abandoned it at the end of the rural road. The same day, the police received a call from Nohima's family reporting her disappearance. Her body was discovered in the forest a few hours later, prompting suspicion of Willard Miller and Jeremy Gooddale's involvement. During the investigation, the two initially provided conflicting stories to the detectives. Willard claimed to have witnessed a group of 6 masked individuals following the teacher into the forest. However, both eventually confessed to the shocking truth, initially trying to blame the other for the act. The metal baseball bat used in the assault was found in Willard's room. However, DNA tests ran on the bat were all negative, as it was very well cleaned. Willard Miller, identified as the main assailant, received a life sentence with eligibility for parole after 35 years, while Jeremy Gooddale, his accomplice, was also sentenced to life with eligibility for parole after 25 years. The disturbing question arises: if a single bad grade can lead to such an act, how little is someone's life valued in the eyes of another? We never know what someone has planned against us. This is probably one of the worst ways to die. On January 2015 in Miami, Florida, a 68-year-old man named Dennis Antiporek left a note for his family that he was going to the community sauna within the Eden Miles condominiums. Dennis regularly used the sauna to treat his chronic medical condition, so once he got there, he cranked up the heat and sat down on one of the seating areas to relax. But this is when things started to go completely wrong. The timer within the sauna was broken, and the heating coil malfunctioned, causing the temperature to rise quickly to very unsafe levels. And because of such extreme hot temperatures, Dennis collapsed and he was unable to escape the sauna room. After a few hours, his family realized that Dennis hasn't returned, so the daughter Laura went down to check up on her father. But upon entering the steaming sauna room, she mistook her father for a dark-skinned man, so she exited out of the sauna. It wasn't until she found her father's clothes on the counter that she realized that the dark-skinned man was actually her father and immediately called for help. Dennis unfortunately passed away due to asphyxiation, and according to his family, his skin was completely broiled as if it was like jerky. This is definitely one of the worst ways to die. On August 23, 2019, a 30-year-old man named Sam Weisburn was trying to exit his apartment in the 23-story Manhattan Promenade Tower in New York by taking the elevator. Inside the elevator was Sam and 6 other occupants, and when the lift reached the lobby, that was when the nightmare began. The elevator door opens into the lobby and a man wearing a backpack emerges out first. Then Sam tried to exit the elevator, but as soon as he had half of his body out, the elevator suddenly started to plunge downwards like a stone, trapping him between the elevator and the shaft wall. Sam struggled immensely to get out, but ultimately the elevator overpowered him and crushed him all the way down to the basement level. Firefighters immediately came onto the scene and were able to rescue the 5 other occupants, but unfortunately for Sam, he was found dead, leaving many people to be afraid of elevators. This video shows a man winning an eating competition in Miami, but this video was taken just moments before a tragic disaster. On October 2012 in Miami, Florida, a 32-year-old man named Edward Archbold stepped onto a reptile store to participate in Friday night's Midnight Madness eating competition. All 20 contestants, including himself, would sit at a large table and be given 2 enormous buckets containing the contents of what they need to eat. And once the bell sounds rang, Edward started shoveling all of the contents down into his mouth, barely even chewing. After the timer ran off, the competition officials checked all of the contestants' buckets, and Edward was declared the winner. But this is where disaster struck, because just moments after he won the competition, Edward started to feel ill, vomited all over the floor, and fell to the ground outside the store. Edward was immediately transferred to the hospital, but unfortunately, he didn't make it and was later pronounced dead. It turns out that Edward was participating in a live insects eating competition, and a cockroach managed to travel back up to his throat and then dive deep down into his lungs, causing him to asphyxiate and die. And what you're seeing is a video of Edward celebrating just moments before he passed away. If you're thinking about grabbing a drink from the kitchen, you might want to reconsider. On February 2012 in Havelock, North Carolina, A 43-year-old man named Gary Allen Banning just finished work and went to his friend's place to chill and relax. Both Gary and his friend had a few drinks, and when Gary went into his friend's kitchen, he noticed a salsa jar by the kitchen sink that contained some brownish liquid. Thinking that it was some sort of whiskey, he took a sip and immediately regretted it as he spitted it out and got some of the liquid onto his clothes. A couple minutes passed by and Gary laughed it off, thinking nothing of it, so he goes outside for a quick smoke. But this is where things get disastrous, because as soon as he lit the cigarette, he immediately burst into flames and was rushed to a medical center. Unfortunately for Gary, it was too late as he eventually passed away, leaving the police wondering why he burst into flames. Well, it turns out that the liquid that Larry drank from the salsa jar was actually gasoline, and when the cigarette flame came into contact with the gasoline stain from his clothes, it ultimately ended his life. This is a photo of a 7-year-old boy playing on what looks like sand, but this was actually taken just moments before a tragic disaster. On August 3rd, 2023 in Brazil, a 7-year-old boy named Arthur Bittencourt and his family were walking along the road until they stumbled onto an excavation site at Pranga Parana. At the site, Arthur noticed what looked like a pile of white sand that was dumped along the side of the dirt road, so he immersed himself in this pile of white sand for fun, and his family took a photo of him posing with 2 thumbs up. And suddenly, just moments after the photo was snapped, Arthur started having serious reaction after inhaling the white substance, and his family immediately rushed him to a nearby hospital. Doctors have attempted to treat him, but unfortunately, Arthur was pronounced dead on arrival and his family was completely devastated. It turns out that the white sand that Arthur immersed himself with was actually limestone dust, and when inhaled, it can cause serious health issues that includes permanent damage to the lungs and even death. And this was the last photo that Arthur's family has taken just moments before his unfortunate death. This is a photo of 2 contestants participating in the 2018 Madden NFL 19 tournament, but this was actually taken just moments before a tragic disaster. On August 26, 2018, the Good Luck Have Fun Game Bar in Jacksonville, Florida, was hosting a Madden NFL 19 video gaming tournament that had roughly 130 to 150 participants and onlookers. One of the gaming participants named David Katz was in attendance, and when he lost the game, he instantly became furious and immediately stormed out of the tournament without shaking the hands of the winner. Then around 1:30 p.m., another contestant named Elijah Clayton was playing his match with another opponent until he was suddenly shot in the chest by a gunshot, shortly ending his life. It turns out that David Katz returned back to the tournament event with one of his 2 handguns and fired 12 shots, ultimately killing 2 gamers and injuring 11 others. The police tried to stop the shooter, but it was already too late as David ended up turning the gun on himself, killing him instantly. And when the police were reviewing the footage, they noticed that a laser was pointing directly towards Elijah's chest. So what you're seeing is the last image of Elijah before he was fatally shot. This has to be one of the most tragic incidents involving a child you ever hear. On May 22, 2015, a 25-year-old mother named Romisha Sims took her 3-year-old son, Jair Dana Ali, to the park to spend some quality time together. Once they got there, Romisha placed Jair on one of the swings and she helped him ride it by pushing him. All was good until suddenly, Romisha started hearing voices around her and found herself in some sort of trance and was unable to lift Jair out of the swing. And when she snapped out of it, she found herself pushing her dead 3-year-old son Jair on the swing as the police surrounded her. It turns out that Romisha is a schizophrenic who forgot to take her medication and ended up pushing her son, Jair, for nearly 44 hours on the swing without stopping. Temperatures also fell as low as 51 degrees and rain was pouring during the swing, which caused Jair to die from dehydration and hypothermia. During her trial, the Charles County judge found Sims not criminally responsible and set her free under a 5-year conditional release order, stating that she must see a psychiatrist and take her medication. This man from Canada has committed one of the worst atrocities in Asia, and what happens afterwards is truly insane. From 2003 to 2007, more than 200 photographs depicting child SA have surfaced on the internet, shocking the whole world. But what's strange about these photos is that the man committing such atrocities has his face obscured by a digital swirl so that no one will be able to find his true identity. But little did he know that German computer experts at the Federal Criminal Police Office were able to reconstruct the original picture using techniques similar to that used by the man in question, but in reverse. And what the police have found is that the man in the photo was actually an English teacher from British Columbia named Christopher Paul Neal, who was teaching at Gwangju Foreign School in South Korea at the time. After Neal was publicly identified, he fled to Thailand on a one-way ticket, but luckily, the Thai police was able to trace him down in Pattaya and finally arrest him on October 19, 2007. But this is where things go insane, because on September 29, 2012, Christopher Neal was only served 5 years in Thai prison before returning to Vancouver and being released from custody under strict conditions. However, in December 2015, Neal would be sentenced again to 5.5 years in prison for the possession of CP, but unfortunately, he would later be released in March 2017, where he's currently living his life in Vancouver with a court order restriction on certain behaviors. This is definitely one of the most mysterious unsolved cases from Japan you'll ever hear. In the 1980s in Japan, a man named Yoshizaku Suzuki suddenly announced that he would fly a balloon aircraft across the Pacific to pay the 500 million yen that he owed to his debt collectors. So on November 23, 1992, at Lake Biwa, Suzuki unveiled his fantasy aircraft that had 6 6-meter balloons and 23 3-meter balloons that are all tied to a wooden gondola. For the trip, he had prepared an oxygen tank, a week's worth of food, a GPS sensor, altimeter, speedometer, an emergency signal for the Coast Guard, parachute, a radio reflector, a cell phone, a map, a thick coat, blankets, a helmet, and sunglasses. Suzuki invited multiple news outlets to show off the fantasy in a test flight, but only Fuji TV was in attendance due to many failed attempts at achieving balloon-powered flight. Then at 4:20 p.m., Suzuki flied onto the fantasy and finally took off screaming, quote, "I am going to America," end quote. When Fuji TV called Suzuki, he would send them little updates along the lines of, "The helium is leaking a little, but I'm fine. The balloons look odd. I took a smoke break," and etc. Fast forward to the night of November 24, an SOS signal was sent out. Japanese Coast Guard found Suzuki off the coast of Miyagi, east of Kinkashan. Suzuki waved at the Coast Guard and stopped the SOS signal, and according to the reports from the Japanese Coast Guard, only 2 out of the 4 main balloons remained. Just as a safety check, the Coast Guard continued to observe him for the next 3 hours, but because he waved his hand, turned the SOS signal off, and tossed items overboard to lighten the load, they believed that he was not in distress and discontinued the rescue operation. But that will be the last time anyone would ever hear from Suzuki ever again. And to this day, his body has never been found.